The Kingsman is directed by Matthew Vaughn and stars Ray Fiennes, Rhys Ifans, I'm sorry if I'm not pronouncing it right, Charles Dance, and among others. And in this story, it is a prequel to the other two Kingsman films that is set in World War One, that deals with Ray Fiennes, who is an operative that's trying to do what's best for his son in order for him to essentially get involved with the Red Cross. And it also deals with him bringing up the birth of the organization that would later would become the Kingsman organization. And on top of that, it deals with a major ongoing war that's going on with World War One with the British Empire, Russia, and Germany. Now, here's some backstory. Now, this is a film that I've actually been looking forward to for quite a while, because ever since I heard about it, when it first came out, being a prequel to the other films, it got me curious. And this was on the back burner for a while of them having to release it due to the acquisition that was established by Disney at the time. And on top of that, it was also going through a lot of release date changes because of the pandemic. And for most, I've really enjoyed the first Kingsman movie. I thought it was a great spy parody of the spy genre, especially the James Bond movies. And I just got a really good kick out of it because it brought something fresh, but also very unique take on the actual spy genre. And then I remember enjoying the second one, but I remember not it being as good as the first because it had a lot of stuff that was in the plot and a lot of stuff that was very convenient that kind of held it back from being as great. But I still thought it was a fun movie with the second one. And when I heard that they were doing a third one, I got really curious because I was figuring, hey, it'd be nice to be able to see a prequel that kind of started all things. Because from what I also heard was that they're planning to still do a third Kingsman film to continue the events that will wrap up the story with Taron Egerton's character. And so I'm really getting interested on what they do with that in the future, but with them doing a prequel got me interested because they were going back to essentially World War One on how it all started. And from the previews and everything, when I first started hearing about it, it got me really thinking that it was kind of going to be like the other films mixed with like 1917, if it be in World War One and all. And then after upon seeing the film, I can say that I enjoyed it, but it definitely it's got some issues compared to the other two films that I'll get into. But to get my pros out of the way, I thought the performances were all great. The biggest ones I thought were Ray Fiennes. I thought he was great. Seeing him doing a lot more action than what he's used to nowadays, it really was refreshing to see, especially since I've seen him in the other James Bond films where he's kind of like the more commanding presence on screen. But I think that it really works here with this character, and I think that he was able to really push more of a lot of the action scenes. The last time I remember even remotely kind of thinking of him doing stuff like this was when he was actually when I heard about that movie he was in called The Avengers. That was based on the TV series, which don't want to go into that much about that movie because I only saw bits and pieces of it. But when I was a kid, that movie used to always just like that was a really terrible movie. So this was like a better version of his character from that, and doing a lot more of what he probably would have done in that film. And I got to really appreciate the other performances too. Especially I forgot the guy's name, but the guy who plays the son I thought was a good standout. And there is a good emotional connection that goes along with him and Ray Fiennes' character in this, and the journey, the art that it really takes with this movie, with the whole the father-son dynamic, I thought was pretty. It was different in a good way that I went along with. That I really got invested with a lot. And there is something that goes along with that along the way that I was really off guard what happens throughout the movie, and so there was that. And then the other performance that I really enjoyed the most was Rhys Ifans. I'm sorry if I can't pronounce his name right, but he plays Rasputin in this, and he was over the top, but in a good way. He brought a lot of great humor that was very kind of out of place as far as tonally in some scenes, but at the same time, I did kind of get the feel they were going for to kind of lighten things the way they're supposed to in this. And he was just very, fun to watch. And I've always liked the guy in a lot of movies, especially ever since I seen him in Little Nicky. And the guy he chews scenery so great in this that I was just really fascinated to watch. And when he has this fight scene that goes along with him and Ray Fiennes and also Digimon Hansu, again, I'm sorry if I can't get his name right. He does like this kind of quirk where he's kind of doing this dancing fighting style that I thought was really was funny, and it really stood out in a good way, and it was actually well choreographed. And to get into some other pros, I'll say that the story itself, I was still actually really getting into with how they were able to blend in the stuff with the World War One angle that they were taking on, especially when it gets into the second act, when it actually kind of becomes a war movie for about, give or take, 10 or 15 minutes, and it does take a more serious approach like this that I was really really refreshing to seeing, and that they weren't trying to, like rehash some of the stuff from the first two movies. Now it's kind of mixed on how they kind of do handle it in certain scenes, and then I'll get to my cons on that later. But I do like the different approach they're going with this, as a lot of the action scenes that they do that are actually filmed, it really shows how Matthew Vaughn really knows how to time fight scenes, especially one that, I'm not going to go into detail, but let's just say it's a melee fight that takes place in World War One that I thought was not only choreographed well, but it really had a lot of suspenseful stuff that was happening in that scene. And then of course there's also the fight with Rasputin that was also great too. And so the way that the action is shot is very competently made, and also just the way the movie blends with, going with a straightforward prequel that kind of stands out in a good way, to where it's essentially trying to explore more of the world that we later see in the later Kingsman films. And they have nice little tie-ins here and there that I thought was really nice that they do. And there is also something quite at the end that I won't go into detail, but there's a post-credit scenes that happens that I was like really surprised that they really did. And it really makes you wonder where this franchise is going to go in the future. Now, to get into some of my cons, I will say that as much as I really enjoy getting into the movie as it being fun, there is some things that happen with the tone of the film that kind of makes it contrasting a lot of the stuff that's involved with the serious moments. Because when it does get into more of the fun moments, it does seem like the humor that's taking place in there, it feels like it's kind of out of tone in a couple parts. Not all of it, but there are a couple parts where it just feels like, okay, we went to a really serious scene that's supposed to happen, and now we're going into a very lighten up scene that really feels out of place, and just the tone of it just doesn't really blend too well. And then of course there's also some stuff that happens where we really could have explored more of what was going on with the World War One stuff, because other than Rasputin, a lot of the villains I really didn't really care too much about, because we're not really spending a whole lot of time with them, and for like some of the other ones of this organization, and a lot of the other ones that are there, they just don't really come across as very they come across as more generic and everything. And also, there's a twist in this film that I won't give away, but let's just say that it's kind of obvious who the villain is, because I pretty much called it in the first opening 15 minutes or so. So that was actually one of my things where I was like, man, why did they have to do that? Because it stood out in a very way where I was like, I know where this is going. I know who this person is now. And so that was pretty underwhelming. But other than that, though, I will say that this was definitely a fun movie, and it's definitely not as great as the first one was. But I still think it's almost on the same level as the second one. Just it has some things I prefer more in from the second one. But then there's other things in the second one that I prefer over this one, as far as its humor and some other stuff. So it's about kind of the same with the second movie. But overall, I thought the movie was, a lot of fun. And with that, I'm going to give the movie a compelling grade on the Film Freaks meter. So, for those of you who've also seen the Kingsman, the Kingsman, let me know, and also the other Kingsman movies as well. Let me know in the comments below what you thought about it. And thanks so much for watching. Stay safe, and I'll see you in my next review. I'll see you later.